This is the Fenway Rundown, as promised, on a Wednesday, January 28th. I'm Chris Cotillo. That's Sean McAdam. There's still no Red Sox news, and there has not been for a little while. We were remarking yesterday,
But
talking
when
about,
did that get in our way?
I know, uh, doesn't stop the professional nature of this podcast. Sean and I were talking yesterday about, wow, this has been as slow as we can remember at any point in the offseason. I think there's, fatigue. The rumor mill's kind of crawled to a stop because it's kind of obvious they need to make one more infield move. We'll get into that as part of today, but today is really going to be kind of the audio component of something that went up on our website, masslive.com, earlier in the day. Um, a roster projection, a first crack at this. The Red Sox, as everybody knows, pitchers and catchers will report in just over 2 weeks. That sets up spring training and then obviously opening day in late March. So we are a far, far way away from when they have to set their 26-man roster, Sean. But I decided to take a first crack at it today. And
And for that, Red Sox Nation thanks you for your
you know what?
diligent research and work.
The audience numbers suggest that they do, and they also suggest that they were extremely, extremely bored today. But here are my general takeaways as I got into this and really looked into it. Number one, there's going to be a lot of kind of competitions and questions to figure out in Fort Myers across the board, especially when you get to the pitching staff. Um, Number two, the bullpen isn't as easy to figure out as you would guess, even as currently constructed before any kind of major moves there. And number three, um, I kind of went off the beaten path when it comes to who they're going to add for their infielder, and we'll get into that. So we'll go
I,
in order.
I,
Go ahead.
I should also add, and this is to detract nothing from your research and your prognostications. There's a very good chance that whatever the roster is on opening day, it does not survive until the home opener.
Yeah.
So which is to say that as much effort as we put into trying to predict the opening day roster, it is often made academic within 48, 72, 96 hours of the first pitch being thrown. And that's never been more true than it has been the last couple of years with the up and down nature of the game, with relievers getting shipped out, with adjustments being made, with minor injuries, with all kinds of constant roster adjustments that begin almost from the first few days of the season.
Yep. And so it would be a really arduous task to project the Red Sox postseason roster if they were to get there in October.
But
It's already
but
an
you won't
impossible.
do that until like June or July,
That's
probably.
right. It's impossible to even project how they are going to, be lining this up for basically 2 months from now. But I took a crack with what they have. It's really more talking about the roster moves, things that could happen, and how this could shake out. Our colleague Chris Smith wrote a column over the weekend. Is the roster better? Is it worse? I think, there's arguments to be made on both sides of that because of the move they made, the guys that have left. It is objectively a roster that's a little dysfunctional and a little unusual. And the questions that we're going to try to answer today, and the Red Sox will answer the next few weeks and months, is how to figure that out. So, starting rotation is where we'll begin. It's where the Red Sox have focused this offseason. And honestly, this in a sense is not hard because there are five guys that you figure you could just put in right now. But in another sense, it's very hard because there's a lot of guys who in on most clubs and on most roster projections before the last couple weeks would have made the team. So I think, and also I will add the caveat, one of these five guys or two or three, as we've seen in the last couple of years, will most likely have some sort of injury that'll rule them out for opening day. It's a numbers game. It's not that any are injury prone. It's not that we're going to predict who. Last year, Bayo, Giolito, and Crawford did not make the opening day roster.
Right.
And the year before, Giolito blew out. Like, this happens every single year. So we can only assume health when you really can't. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think Bayo has been sidelined on opening day in 2 of the last 3 years.
yeah.
He made the opening day start in Seattle at the start of 24, but the year prior and the year after, he had a minor setback, very early in spring training that delayed his progression so that he wasn't able to take his first regular start. And we're probably, as you hinted, are going to have at least one of those, if not more.
And,
I don't mean Bayo necessarily, but somebody.
right, he's in the WBC, but the point is, one of these guys is going to come up with something, and the Red Sox can be very careful because of the depth they have.
Yep.
So, without further ado, and after an extremely long lead in, the starting five I would project: Crochet, obviously, Suarez, Sonny Gray, Brian Bayo, and Johan Oviedo. I think that that is your five moving into spring training, barring injury, barring the only real chance in that group you see of something happening is if Bayo gets moved in a surprise trade. The closer we get to opening day, less likely that is. The after effects of that, to me, Connolly Early and Peyton Tolley start the year at AAA, not in the bullpen. There's not a lot of sure things on this roster projection. That's one of them. They're not going to be in
Yep.
the bullpen
I
to
agree.
start the year. Cutter Crawford and Patrick Sandoval are that next group of what do you do with them if someone's hurt. Those guys are slotted in, assuming they're healthy. Obviously, both of them working back from injury. My prediction, and again, could go a billion different ways. I'm just kind of guessing because what else is there to do in late January? Crawford moves to the bullpen to start the year as a stay ready, long relief option, and Sandoval's traded in an effort to move money. I think he's a guy that you get to spring training. He shows a couple of starts. Someone offers you something for him. They take that 10 million CBT hit. He's a guy that, especially, with Crochet, Suarez, Early, Tolley, all these lefties, is just redundant on this roster. He could be a good major leaguer. He could have a good year, but things have changed between when they signed him and now. That makes him trade bait. The next group down, Kyle Harrison, who no one talks about, and then, kind of your prospect type, Drowan, David Sandlin, Tyler Uberstein, and Jake Bennett are your next level of depth. Those guys will all be in major league camp, but it would take, heaven and earth moving for those
Yeah,
guys
I
to
would
crack the opening
separate
day roster.
Harrison. I would separate Harrison from those other two,
Yeah, or
because
three or four.
he did acquit himself pretty well in September with a couple of appearances, and he does have the big league experience that neither Uberstein nor Sandlin have.
Or
So,
Drowan or Bennett.
or right, right. So he's kind of above those and would have the better chance of breaking through in case something happened that we don't anticipate, an injury, a trade, something there. But yeah, your larger point, I agree with that most of those guys are going to start the year at AAA.
And so, where do you look at? I think it's kind of tough to place any. I mean, I guess really the only way that if everybody's healthy, that starting five is different is let's say Oviedo really struggles in sprint training and Crawford has a really good camp, and maybe Oviedo goes into the bullpen, which they don't seem like they want to do, or you put him in AAA because he has options, which you're not going to do. I mean, something like that. Generally, do you think it's those
Yeah, I
five
mean,
barring
of the
health?
five, he has the least amount of claim, I guess, in
Yeah,
terms of stature and experience and accomplishment at the big league level. He's also, been injury, uh, I don't want to say prone, but impacted the last couple of years. So if you're ranking them 1 through 5, there's a reason he's fifth in that rotation, because if the littlest things happen, he's probably the most vulnerable in terms of retaining a spot. Crochet's a lock, Gray's a lock, Suarez
Suarez.
is a lock, Bayo's pretty close to a lock, accepting some sort of unforeseen trade or development there or injury. So it stands to reason that Oviedo is the guy who can feel least comfortable among those five of absolutely owning a rotation spot for Cincinnati. But even then, it would take some doing to knock him out.
And this is, I think, the greatest example probably on the roster of your point about opening day roster versus later in the year. Early and Tolley, assuming they're not traded, are going to be huge parts of this team. We don't know when. Injury could cause it, performance could force it, whatever it is. But, and that could even be in a bullpen role, as we saw with Tolley, if those things dictate that he should be in that late in the year if they need that guy. But they're going to be stretched out at Worcester. The Worcester rotation is going to be, close to a very young, but close to a capable major league rotation. If you're
Yeah.
assuming those guys are there, Harrison's there. What do you think on Crawford and Sandoval? Last thing on the rotation.
Um, yeah, I don't know about Sandoval being the most likely to be traded, although because of his salary, which is around nine,
9 or 10,
10,
yeah.
um, there can be some savings there if they are interested. I don't think that they're necessarily uh, have any marching orders to get under that second threshold. But if you are looking to do that, and you don't have to do it now, it's all about where you end up at the end of the year. Um, maybe they put their focus on trying to move some more dead wood in terms of the payroll, and I'm talking about somebody like Yoshida,
We'll get there.
right, and also um,
Hicks.
right, Jordan Hicks, who is due 12 million times two over the next 2 years, right?
Yeah.
So maybe just because there's less value in those two guys, that their loss could be more easily absorbed. Not that you look at Sandoval as as a guy who's definitely in the rotation if all things are equal, but he has more value certainly than the other three and would be easier to move. So my only thought being they may try to, whether it's attaching a prospect or not taking anything in return, or a bag of balls in return, they may more clearly focus on trying to get the real deadwood off the payroll rather than move Sandoval, who you have to assume, if he's healthy, could be moved and there would be interest in him throughout the season. That's not true of Yoshida and Hicks, at
Right.
least in spring training.
Well, that moves us to the bullpen where Jordan Hicks is in play. I think the bullpen is a really, really kind of weird group as presently constituted
Very
because
top heavy.
you have,
Their end guys are really good,
yep,
and then there's about four spots that are completely interchangeable.
yep. And, options actually make them not as interchangeable as you would have thought, or I would have thought heading into this. Obviously, you can lock Chapman into the ninth, Whitlock into the eighth. That leaves you 6 spots in that bullpen.
To me, Slayton's a lock.
And Slayton is one of them. I think Weisert's pretty close to a lock
Yeah,
based on
yep,
the role
yep.
he's had the last couple of years. So you start with those four. I have Crawford in there as the long man, which I think is a good role for him to start the year. It also allows you to ease in the other guys at AAA, potentially ease him in a little bit. And then that leaves 3 spots. My three go to Zach Kelly, who they're high on having a big year and a breakout year. He inexplicably still has options left though. And then lefty Giovanni Moran, who does not have options, which is important, and who they are talking up like crazy.
Yep.
And then I think you have to add a left-handed veteran.
Like how he looked in winter ball in Puerto Rico.
Yep. And I have them adding a left-handed reliever on a major league deal. Danny Coulomb is the guy that I have. You could put in a million different guys. I have
Yep.
CNL Perez, Chafin, Brent Suter, Justin Wilson is out there. I just think that they do still need that guy. And with that, concessions are going to have to be made. And the two kind of biggest ones are Jordan Hicks is cut or traded. I mean, this is a team that's going to be intent on contending. And if he doesn't show you a lot in spring training, a move has to be made because you have, if it comes down to do you want Moran on the roster or, Kelly or Hicks? Like they're at a point now where we're not going to do this while he's out of options and he can be option. They need the best 26 the whole time.
Yeah,
And the
and
other, go ahead.
but not only, I mean, even if he weren't out of options, even if he had some, he probably has enough service time to refuse one. So there's no easy out there.
Yeah. And then the other kind of down ballot effect of this is that they have a Rule 5 guy in Ryan Watson, who they like. It doesn't hurt you to pick him up in a small trade at the winter meetings. Slayton and Whitlock, those teams had more room to have those guys be good Rule 5 guys. I could see Ryan Watson being squeezed out here pretty
Yeah.
soon.
Well,
And
it's harder to hide a Rule 5 guy all year when you have the intention of contending.
yep.
And that was not the case with Whitlock.
Well,
In
they did contend, but they were horrible the year before in
Yeah,
21.
right. There were no maybe expectations of contending in 2021. They were building towards something, and the same goes for some other guys that have been in that Rule 5 class. But this is different, and roster spots are at more of a
They do
premium.
not remain.
They do not remain, right?
No.
Um, so yeah, it's going to be harder for him to stay and kind of be hidden for an entire year than the last two guys that they have uncovered in that role.
And again, you can expect throughout the year, they'll have to make a decision on Watson by the end of camp. They'll probably have to make a decision on Jordan Hicks by the end of camp, yes or no. They'll have to make a decision on Giovanni Moran and, if they add somebody, whether it's the Coulomb, Camp, anybody else. But this is a very fungible group where Kelly will be, most likely going up and down. Crawford is one of those spots right now, but you could see as the year goes on, if Kyle Harrison pitches well, maybe there's a lot that happens here. And then that doesn't even take into account some of the other 40-man guys, Sandlin, Uberstein, Tyler Samaniego, who they got in the Oviedo trade, non-roster guys. Seth Martinez is a guy with major league experience. There's a lot of guys. Another takeaway, there's not a lot of room for a non-roster invite to make this team just because they have all these options on the 40 and they're crowded. Another thing I want to add, working against Watson, they're already short on 40-man spots, as evidenced by how they traded our friend Tristan Gray, who appeared on one Fenway run down 0 games for the Red Sox. Might never happen again.
His one shining moment.
Yeah, nice guy, very nice guy. But he was traded, and so they're out of 40-man spots. So, like, if they add Coulomb or somebody like that, you could see them DFAing Ryan Watson. I mean, that's just kind of where they are right now, and so is what it is. Catcher, we don't have to spend more than 2 minutes on this. I think, at this point, Narvaez. Yeah, Narvaez.
No, I mean, I'm of the firm belief that they continue to look around for backup upgrades. I don't think they're satisfied with Wong. We know that, they have at least had some discussions about some catchers this year who would presumably bump Wong. And it's an area that they have been trying to, going back to Dalton Rushing last year at the around the trade deadline. They clearly aren't satisfied with what they have in terms of a number two. So I don't think that's the slam dunk that you portray it as. I think there's at least a pretty good chance of a catcher being invited and or signed to a major league deal in the next couple of weeks and really competing for that backup spot.
And Wong, has minor league options too, so it's not a situation where you have to cut him. I've floated Christian Vasquez. They need a veteran. Christian Vasquez, Elias Diaz, Mitch Garver, Jacob Stallings, Tar Heel, Gary Sanchez, and Matt Dice. Like, these are guys who are, dime a dozen out there. Sign one to an NRI and see if he can push. I mean, last year they had Sable on the 40, along with Narvaez. The year before, Jorge Alfaro and Roberto Perez and some of these guys that have come through. There's room to add one of them. And then simply option Wong to begin the season if, he doesn't have a good camp. As of now, I mean, I don't think they add somebody with the 40-man crunch, being what it is. I don't think anybody in that group gets a major league deal probably anyway. Jonah Heim is out there, but I don't think that that's a guy that, makes a ton of sense for this
Well,
team
I mean,
right
the
now.
fact that these guys are still there,
Right.
Less than 2 weeks before camp suggests that they don't have what?
It opens the door.
Yeah, but I'm saying that the fact that they're out there means that you likely aren't going to need to give any of them a major league deal.
Yeah. So that's the catching situation. Not, super, super pressing, but we do know that they are continuing to dig. Let's get into the infield, Sean, which continues to be the part of this roster that is the most unsettled. Wilson Contreras is the first baseman.
Correct.
Trevor Story is the shortstop. From there,
Correct.
it's anyone's guess. And as
Throw
I wrote,
all the names up in the air.
and as I wrote, and as I tweeted, I think Plan A, as we reported, they remain in serious trade talks across the league and trying to get, whoever it is. And you've heard the names from Paredes to Shaw to Horner to all these different people. Ketel Marte earlier in the winter. I mean, we've gone through these names over and over. I think their number one priority is figuring out either second or third, getting a palatable deal. The point I'm making in this projection, in which I have the Red Sox signing a Eugenio Suárez, is that as the clock ticks, it's harder to line up on a trade and easier to get a guy like Suárez when his market collapses. Because Houston does not have to trade Paredes. The
Right.
Cubs do not have to trade Horner or Shaw. The Diamondbacks will not be trading Marte. Suárez has to sign with somebody. And it could be on a bad offer. And it could be if his market collapses.
Okay.
Every day that passes.
Define market collapsing, and what does he get?
1 year deal.
Okay, what's the
I mean,
money?
at that point, it almost doesn't really matter, but one for 16, one for 15. I don't know. I'm
Right.
guessing.
So my point being is that how can you say that they are so mindful of where they are with the CBT that they would
It's all related.
let me finish, that you would be
See,
either releasing or eating a big chunk of Hicks's deal, the same with Yoshida, but you're happily handing out another 15 or 16 for a flawed player? I don't see it. I
yeah,
mean, if they are going to try to, in a worst case scenario, not go up any further on the second threshold, a $15 million addition is not a small one and really kind of gets them up closer to that third one. I just don't see them uh, making that kind of exception and that sort of financial stretch for a player as flawed, and he is,
yeah,
as Eugenio Suárez is. They need three things, right? They need power, they need contact, and they need defense. He gives you one in spades,
hmm
power, obviously, and the other two are huge demerits for him. He strikes out not a lot, a ton,
yeah,
and he is almost unplayable defensively.
right.
So that combined with, let's take your number of 15 or 16. What's the motivation there?
I think the fact that they can't come to a palatable deal if Houston's saying we're not doing Paredes unless we get,
In that case, I think
you
they're
know,
more likely to go, let's see what Dylan Moore looks like.
yeah,
Let's try some things. And if we have to adjust, we adjust. I don't think they make well, we got to get somebody, and Suarez is still out there.
yeah. I mean, the first of all, I really think that the YouTube audience is going to understand the tone of the "let me finish" with the smile and the smirk a lot more than the Spotify audience that always criticizes that we bicker like an old married couple. See, now you're laughing right now, and I'm smiling right now. Everybody who's listening to the audio version, we're laughing and smiling. Sean, tell them you're happy. There we go. Okay. Even that audio wise is going to sound sarcastic. And we're trying, folks. Okay. Dry humor does not come through the Spotify or the Apple. It comes, watch on YouTube. You can see. Okay. Um, I agree with the general premise on everything you said about Suarez. I have that hand in hand with kind of drastic, like money saving moves. Like you trade Sandoval, you get a prospect back, and someone takes on that 10. And then you attach a prospect to Yoshida, which we're about to get to, and move him. And you have all of a sudden 26, 27 coming off the books. Or, I mean, there are avenues here, and especially ones you have to pursue if Suarez is your guy. The point I was making by doing this is, again, I think in a perfect world, they'd get that trade done. But the chance that the market falls to where they get something palatable is better on the free agent market. And as flawed as he
Agreed.
is,
I,
he's
I
a
just
guy who's
don't
out
see
there.
that level of desperation for somebody who has as many holes in his game as
Yeah,
Suarez does.
I get it, and I think there's a chance that they don't either. But um, we'll see. And the other piece of this, and I tweeted this as well. You know, addition A, and that could be Suarez. It could be one of the Cubs. Could be whoever it is. That's going to move Marcelo Meyer to that other spot. People are always like, well, Meyer's going to play that spot. That's it. I think it's going to be Meyer and Romy Gonzalez are going to platoon at that spot. Gonzalez, a guy who's played, he's not going to get many at bats at first base now. We know that. He's going to be playing second in a platoon with Meyer or third in a platoon with Meyer. They want that
Well,
bat against lefties for sure.
yeah, I agree that there will be some of that. I question, given their goal of upgrading defense,
Yeah.
why you would be sacrificing playing time for a clearly superior defender, and that's Meyer over Gonzalez. At some point, and I know he doesn't have a lot of major league at bats, and we're not in the Wilyer Abreu neighborhood yet, where okay, he's played basically close to two full seasons. It's time to take the training wheels off and let him figure out how to hit lefties. Meyer's not had that major league service time. He's not had that level of experience, but if there are going to be some holes here, and particularly if it's playing Suarez at third every day or a lot, then do you really want Suarez and Romy Gonzalez on the infield
Yep.
together? Does that represent any kind of defensive upgrade for them? No, it doesn't. So I think there will be some opportunities for Romy to play and platoon with wherever Meyer is to limit his exposure to lefties, but I don't think it's going to be a strict platoon, and I'm not sure how long it's going to last.
Yep. And here is something that I think you could see them do. We talk about platooning based on who's on the mound for the other team, and that's the truest sense of the word. How about platooning based on who's on the mound for you? On
Yep.
a Garrett Crochet
Suarez is going to
day,
get a lot of ground balls.
on a Garrett Crochet day, you can roll out probably a little bit worse of an infield than you can on a Ranger Suarez day or a
Right.
Sonny Gray day or a Brian Bayo day. So maybe there's like Crochet and Oviedo are the strikeout guys, like, and maybe later in the game you usually sacrifice for defense. I don't know. There's going to be some interesting calls for Cora there. I just think the more time that goes on, as we get into February here almost, the chance on Eugenio, as you pronounce it, as it's supposed to be pronounced, is better than it was a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago. And, if they're bidding against like the Pirates and some of these other teams that are linked to him, they could get a pretty palatable deal, even though he's flawed. And we know and the flaws are why he wasn't a top target to go get in November or December, as we reported. So I get all of that. Backup options, Casas on the IL, Nick Sogard, David Hamilton, all those guys still in the mix have options and will be part of it.
Yeah.
Outfield, what? Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, I know that guys like Eaton and Sogard get talked up a lot. The manager has done that a lot this winter. I am not convinced, and I don't think there's much evidence to convince me that either of those guys are everyday players at the big league level. Can they
Yep,
fill
totally
in
agree.
for an injury for a couple of weeks? Sure. Are they, occasional platoon partners? Yeah, maybe. Not everyday contributors.
Yep, that brings us to the outfield, which is not as unsettled in a different way. The infield doesn't have enough bodies. The outfield has too many. We'll start with Eaton because I have him projected in here. It's pretty clear to me that they want him to take on the Rob Refsnyder role of getting certain starts and being kind of in this case, would be a fifth outfielder against lefties. Um, the Rob Refsnyder role doesn't really exist as much anymore because Abreu is going to be playing against lefties. You're going to have, Anthony in there against lefties, whatever it might be. But for a guy to come in, get a pinch hit spot against a lefty, Nate Eaton is a guy they like the at bats, they like the speed, they like the positional versatility. He played in the infield too, could play third, all that stuff. So that's one part of it. I have Campbell not making the team starting in AAA, which it seems like they want to do. Bigger picture, I have them because I don't see in the whole roster projection, which all ties together, a big trade happening before opening day. I have Anthony, Rafaela, Abreu, and Duran all remaining on the roster, which, again, every day that ticks by increases the chances of that. I don't think either of you expect a March 10th trade where Jaron Duran packs up his bags and leaves camp. It's, not something that can't happen, but as time goes on, it becomes less likely. And therefore, I have, as I've been projecting and predicting for years, that they finally do cut bait with Yoshida. And to me, like, this sounds dramatic, and I'm going to throw out a name, and people are going to be like, holy, that's awful. You have a team take on a huge chunk of Yoshida, if not all of it, and you send David Sandlin or somebody like that, and you get a low-level minor leaguer back and call it a day. Like, those are the types of trades that
Yeah,
you make your
I
roster
actually
more
think you've
functional.
got to. I think you've got to do better than Sandlin, and I don't think he's a bad prospect.
Yeah.
He throws hard. He has shown some ability to start at the AAA level. The experiment in the bullpen did not work out last September. I don't think that's going to be held against him for his entire career. Some guys can't make that transition. If David Sandlin ends up being a 4 or 5 guy and can give you, north of 150 innings as a back end guy, then you gladly take that. Especially when you think about what you gave up for him, kind of you know, uh, a decent seventh inning guy, then that's still a win. But I think if you're trying to unload $36 million of salary, you're probably going to have to do better than David Sandlin to get a team to bite.
I mean, would you do that? Like, do you
Yeah,
future?
I would do Sandlin. I'm just not sure a lot of other
Yeah.
teams would.
Would you do some? Would you do somebody better? I don't. You don't have to give me a name, but like just to get him off the books, clear the money, make the roster more functional.
It's something they're probably going to have to consider
Yeah.
because if Yoshida hasn't fit before, it's harder now, given the four outfielders. Uh, you know, do you really want, as the left-handed part of a platoon, him to be starting two-thirds of your games? Wouldn't be the worst thing, but he's also not. I mean, the one good thing is he puts the ball in play, doesn't strike out a ton. That's sort of consistent with the upgrades they're looking for. But he also gives you very little in the way of run production, and you should have that as your DH. So I wonder, how long that they can find a spot for him, or how long they can hide him on the 26.
I am projecting in this that Anthony, Rafaela, Abreu, and Duran are all on the team on opening day. It's something I've kind of felt strongly about since really mid-December. Do you think any of those guys are moved before opening day?
Well, the hard thing is we don't know about health of everybody else, which could certainly impact who they look to move and what they're trying to do there. I would say there's still a chance for a decent sized trade before opening day, and that may not get to the level of Duran, but I think they could end up doing some kind of deal, whether it involves a prospect to help unload a big salary, like Hicks or like Yoshida. But as we stand here, it's incomplete. And if they don't get something done in the next 10 days, the clock starts ticking once everybody reports.
Yep. And I think the big thing here, it's a roster that, again, is okay. There's, pros and cons to it, but not super functional. And that's a question the Red Sox have to figure out the next couple weeks.